This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 496, entitled Women's Domination of Boys' Lives is Not in Women's Self-Interest. Description. This flyer hypothesizes that one of the reasons men fear the growing power of women is that it reminds them of the femalien presence of female giants who dominated their lives as small boys by mothers and primary school teachers. The whining and nagging of these women caused millions of men to vow that they will never again be subjugated by women like that for the rest of their adult lives. With their adult male superior intelligence and strength, they can ensure that that happens. If the third wave feminists want to achieve real power for women, then it is in their self-interest to give young boys male role models in the home and in the primary schools. Now the flyer itself. Oh, still not there. Bear with me. Women's domination of boys' lives is not in women's self-interest, by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. This flyer attempts to answer the question, quote, why do men feel so threatened by the rise of female power? What is the source of that fear? I was watching a recent BBC documentary series on the rise of women and women's power, and how men, time and time again, felt threatened by that rise and suppressed it, that is, took away women's power. I felt that there was no analysis on the part of the feminist woman who produced it as to why men feel so threatened by female power, so this flyer makes a contribution towards an answer. This flyer makes the case that it is not in women's self-interest to dominate the lives of little boys, because when they have grown up, they never want to be dominated that way again for the rest of their lives, especially considering that as male adults, as men, they are smarter and a lot stronger than women, so have the power to stop women dominating them again. What I'm saying here is that in our modern world, the lives of boys are dominated by women. When the mother in a nuclear family is not a careerist, not a FIP, that's financially independent person, and stays at home raising her son, then obviously she dominates his young little life, because his father is out of the house all day making the money to keep him and his parasitic mother alive. When he turns 4 or so, he goes to kindergarten and later to primary school, where over 90% of his teachers are female, who again dominate his life. Little boys soon recognize that these alien female giants, called mothers and teachers, are not the same as him. They are femaliens to him, with a different way of seeing the world, with different brains, who are a lot more emotional, moody and hysterical than him, who command a lot less respect in his eyes than his father, who thinks the same way he does and whom he respects a lot more. Even in secondary school, growing boys still face a sea of female teachers who continue to dominate their male lives. Increasingly, these female teachers bring their monoconscious feminist ideological beliefs into the classroom, indoctrinating these boys with the feminist belief that gender oppression is a one-way street, to which, if the young boy knows nothing of masculinist ideas, he is unable to answer back. Because young boys are small, they cannot answer back to a mother or a female primary school teacher who is twice his height, so he has no choice but to grin and bear it. He is literally forced, in capital letters, to put up with female nagging, cajoling, etc. Personally, whenever I hear a female nagging, it makes me wince, since it reminds me of my shitty mother who constantly nagged my poor father for, quote, not having enough drive. A favourite term of my housewife mother when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s. I used to listen to her project her ambitions onto him, nagging him mercilessly for not being ambitious enough. Even as a small boy, I could not help thinking of my mother, quote, so why don't you get off your own parasitic ass and get a career yourself instead of living a vicarious life through your husband? End quote. I learned to hate that whining, nagging tone of women, so would never tolerate it as a man. Any woman who started going down that path with me would rapidly see the back of me. I will not tolerate a whining, nagging female in my life again. I now do wonder what happens when millions of men have similar experiences at the hands of femalien giants when they are small boys. Do they then collectively, instinctively feel threatened when women whine and push for more female power as adults? Question mark. Is male fear of female domination that they felt as small boys the root cause of the almost universal suppression of female power in most cultures throughout history, as the BBC host of the above programme kept referring to? Question mark. Let's say that there's a lot of truth in the above hypothesis, that is, that men fear being dominated by women as adults the way they were earlier in their lives, by femalien giants, by their mothers and female teachers. If that's the case, then it seems to follow that it would be in women's collective interests to dilute their female monopoly of young boys' lives. How might this be done? Question mark. By using masculinist political solutions. For example, set up gender equality committees in the parliaments that consist half of female feminists and half of male masculists, so that the gender issues of both sexes are dealt with equally, which is far from being the case today, when gender issues are so highly gynocentric. Once these gender equality committees are established, one of the first legislative acts of the masculists in these committees would be for the boy-faring of the schools, by creating new legislation that would create positive discrimination towards male primary school teachers, giving them much higher pay, so that men are more attracted to teach young boys in kindergarten and primary school, thus providing young boys with male role models that they are so sorely deprived of in today's culture. There are many other laws that the masculinist members of these committees could pass to overcome the gynocracy of young boys' lives. For example, when the mother is staying home for, say, 6 years, while her 2 kids are small, until the second kid is off to kindergarten, then the government can pay the mother a motherhood wage for those 6 years, so that the father does not have to shoulder the considerable burden of being the sole breadwinner of the family, so can afford to work less hours and play a stronger role in the upbringing of his son by being home for more hours in the day, unlike, say, in Japan or Korea, where the father typically works so many hours that by the time he comes home to his housewifey wife, his kids are asleep, thus orphaning them. With half of the members of the Gender Equality Committee being masculists, society will be increasingly influenced by masculist ideas and hence will be made to think more biconsciously, knowing that gender oppression is a two-way street, so that even very small boys will know some masculist ideas. So if some retrograde young monoconscious feminist kindergarten teacher tries to tell her young boys that men are toxic, then a bright little 5-year-old boy can snap back at her, "Teacher, you're a woman. You women have 10% smaller brains than men. You women are dumber than men and don't win Nobel Prizes in science." Unquote. That would soon shut her up. So, to more far-sighted feminist theorists, it is in women's self-interest to decrease their dominance over young boys' lives, so that later in life, these now grown-up men will be less inclined to fear female dominance and be more prepared to share power with women, which is seen by the masculist theorists as a prerequisite for the effective fipping of women, that is, pushing women hard to fip up or rot on the shelf. One of the core ideas of the masculists is the fipping of women, the creation of a FIP society, where both sexes, especially girls, are socialised and educated by parents and teachers to be FIPs, by bothering to get a career-competent education, so that they can be FIPs as adults and not financially parasite on a man for decades of his life, thus manslaving him for decades. That will eventually get such a woman killed by masculist soldiers if a sex war comes, if the gender laws are not soon men-fared, especially in the divorce courts, where one father in 4 is financially massacred and has his life destroyed by the hated, fluffy feminist hypocrite genociders who control these courts. The main message of this flyer is that women are partially responsible for the adult male resistance to female power. So it is in the self-interest of women to help the masculists to achieve their goals of men-faring society in the divorce courts, legislating the PARA, that's paternity rejection right, setting up gender equality committees in the parliaments and creating a FIP society. It will then be a lot easier for women to take half the power, as the third wave feminists want, due to a much lower level of resistance coming from men who were brutalised by femalien giants when they were small, and hence never want to be brutalised by women that way again in their adult lives, and since they are men with smarter brains and stronger bodies, can ensure that that will not happen. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man-Slaves to Women, an e-textbook of 490 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses, freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.